Good morning. We're live with Debbie Meyer talking dyslexia. She's going to tell us about her journey from being a concerned mom to an activist. Before we begin, I want to remind you that you can place your questions or comments in the comment section and we will read them. Debbie will answer your questions live during the discussion, so please feel free to contribute. Why don't we begin with you telling us your journey, Debbie?
Thanks, Kamira. Nice to be here.
Thank you.
So my son, we thought, was an early reader. When he was 2.5, he looked up at the bus sign in New York City and said, MTA spells bus. He understood that letters make up words. We were really excited. But he actually couldn't rhyme. He didn't hear rhymes. He hated Dr. Seuss. He didn't really like Sesame Street. Turns out he had no phonemic awareness and no one taught it to him. So he went to preschool. Teachers were really concerned he didn't know his colors, even though his health history said he was colorblind. They were very concerned that he didn't know his colors. Well, they didn't really care about his lack of rhyming and his lack of phonemic awareness. Got to kindergarten. He was bright. They were so excited about what a member of the community was, but they still weren't concerned about his reading. He started falling behind all his friends, not behind all his peers, but behind all his friends. Mm-hmm. And that's really frustrating. By the end of first grade, the school noticed something and they threw him into a summer 1-week professional development for teachers. Clearly, the teachers weren't teaching a lot of kids how to read. Well, it turns out this professional development was not one of the quality professional developments that really helps teachers learn how to teach reading. Second grade, he got an IEP, but that really didn't help because no teachers were trained to teach reading.
Can you tell us what an IEP is?
Sure. An IEP, and I was going to actually talk about this a little later, but an IEP is an individual education plan. It's supposed to guide teachers and families on goals and instruction. And so you should get the right instruction. His IEP put him in a class with a special ed teacher and a general ed teacher. It's called an integrated co-teaching class. But the special ed teacher was not trained on how to teach reading. So he fell behind again. We got a private neuropsych. It cost a good amount of money. And we actually had told the school that dyslexia runs in our family, but the school shut us down. They didn't believe in dyslexia. So the neuropsych showed that he had dyslexia through the tests, testing his phonemic awareness, his rapid automatic naming, and things like that. She came to our meeting. The school still said, we'll put him in the ICT class. We still didn't get good instruction. So we sent him to a summer camp for dyslexic kids. It was amazing. He got an hour of one-on-one instruction from a qualified teacher and then played all day. It wasn't like summer school. It was like summer camp. He got to play all day. Towards the end of the day, when kids were kind of hot and been outside all day, they had a 1-hour study hall to practice what they learned in the morning. That was great too. He came home reading and writing much closer to grade level. He wasn't quite there, but he probably jumped 2 grade levels in that summer. It was amazing. He wrote his hopes and dreams for the class, and it was posted on the wall in beautiful cursive. It was amazing. So that was the beginning of 4th grade. In January, the kids were asked to update their hopes and dreams. And we had a chance to come into the school for parent-teacher conference or something. And we looked at the 4th grade, the 2 things, the fall and the winter. His writing and spelling had fallen apart already because he had no support in school keeping up what he had learned over the summer. And we decided we had to pull him out of that school. We were really lucky. We had resources. We could hire a lawyer. We could sue the school system and get tuition. And we got into one of the specialized schools for dyslexic kids for 5th grade. 5th to 8th grade. Well, I do have to say, the school he was at, he learned incredible content and incredible social justice. But those skills were at a byproduct. 5th to 8th grade, he went to a school where he learned incredible skills. He learned how to write a 10-page paper. It was a beautiful paper. He got into reading. at summer camp in 7th grade, he had taken with him a memoir by Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And I got 5 letters from him to please send him the autobiography of Malcolm X. It was really exciting. The kid was reading. So he learned how to read. But because the dyslexia school had to spend so much time on this remediation, all that content in science and social studies was really kind of the state minimum. And he had to search for that in other places. He listened to podcasts. We went to museums. We looked at other articles. There was a lot of stuff he had to do on his own for content. But between the 2 schools, he ended up getting into one of New York City's screened high schools. He's at Bard High School Early College. All this is because I'm a parent with resources. I have a college education, and I have a lot of people I can call on. And we had a house. We could take some equity out of it. It worked.
So when I was so excited, this is a great breaking point, though. This is something that works for the better. I was so excited. I didn't give our audience your credentials, but it works perfectly here because you've told your story, and you've told your story of being a concerned parent and your family's story along with your son. And now here's a perfect spot for me to tell everybody that you are a founding member. Because of this experience, you're a founding member of the Dyslexia Plus in Public Schools Task Force, a small group of community leaders working to help students with dyslexia and related language-based disabilities thrive in their neighborhood schools. You also serve on the board of 3 organizations: Dyslexia Alliance for Black Children, Women Creating Change, and Harlem Women Strong. These are things that Debbie did not do before, but resulting from your activism and your family's experience. Am I correct?
Exactly. I just realized that my kid was so lucky. But I thought about the parent who has 2 jobs. Maybe during the day they work at the Walgreens, and they can't really interview 5 neuropsychs to figure out which one is going to work with their kid.
Absolutely.
And I thought, what's going to happen to all these children? And what could we do about it? And so I started talking to other mothers with dyslexic kids and figuring out what we could do about it. And we've been talking to the DOE, made some progress there. I joined those organizations. I joined some other committees and really started looking. But the culmination of all that is I was awarded Columbia University a Layla Bundles Community Scholarship. And that's an opportunity to study by auditing classes at Columbia. I get to meet with professors when I want, and I get to use the library forever, which means I'm out of the University of Google and Facebook.
Yay. We have a comment. I'm going to share the comment. Kathleen says, the camp sounds like a wonderful camp. Is it still operating, and where is it?
Yes, there's actually 3 or 4 of them in the country. So he went to Camp Dunnebeck, which is in Amenia, New York. There's one in either North or South Carolina. There's one in Colorado, and I think there's one more. And I can send Kamira all that information, and maybe she can post it somewhere in the Facebook link or something. But there are one's the Rocky Mountain camp, and one's like the Mountainside camp or something like that. Okay. But they all are children of Camp Dunnebeck.
Wonderful. That was a great question. Thank you, Kathleen. Let's back up a little bit and define dyslexia for the audience.
Sure. So dyslexia is not a vision issue. A lot of people think it is. It is it's neurobiological in origin. And it has to do with connecting sounds to symbols and being able to then put that down on paper. So our alphabet, we think of it as 26 letters. I wonder if anyone listening knows how many sounds, how many phonemes we have in our alphabet or in our language. We've got 44 phonemes in our language. Some accents are only 42, but mostly we have 44 different sounds. Okay. We have over 200 ways to spell these sounds. For many kids, learning those 200 ways to spell the 44 sounds with our 26 letters comes kind of easily. But for about 60% of kids, it's much harder. And for about 15% of kids, the dyslexic kids, it's really, really hard. Dyslexia Effects Some people say it's 20% of the population. Some people say it's 5 to 12%. I kind of take it in the middle and say it's 15% of the population. Dyslexic kids need much more structured literacy, and they have to learn it by code, like that other 60%. But they need to learn it on a repeated basis. They need about 15 to 30 times of being instructed on a code to really put it in their brain. Mm-hmm. It doesn't go in there by natural.
And what do you mean by code?
So a code is, well, tell me, Meyer, how many ways can you spell long A? You could
E-H-A with the line across the top. Okay, those are the two that come straight.
Yeah, maybe I can put it in. Am I allowed to comment?
You should be able to, yes.
Let's see. I don't see how. So there's a consonant E, like cake.
Yep.
There's A-Y, like tray, like you carry something on.
Yeah.
There's E-Y, like prey, like something a coyote eats.
Yeah.
E-I-G-H-T, ate.
Yeah.
Gauge with a U.
Yeah.
There's probably like 4 others. These are all the codes for that long A sound.
Okay.
So I think, yeah, there's a bunch of others. And then think of O-U-G-H. Do through and though match?
Exactly.
Do they sound alike?
No. No.
Does rough sound like either of them?
Yeah. No.
So there's our language is really, really complicated. And all these things are codes that are overlaid our language, because our language comes from English, Old English. It comes from German. It comes from the Vikings. Some Norwegian got into it. Scottish and Irish people walked around the English continent dropping words into it. The Normans came through England. The Romans came through England. If you think of all these cultures that came through England as the language was developing, there's all sorts of words in it. Mm-hmm. The scribes started codifying how to spell the words. And then the printing press came in about 1440, I think, maybe a little later, and really codified how to spell words. Mm-hmm. And it came from all these different sources. And so these words are not spelled alike. There were some really smart people named Orton and Gillingham in the 1940s who figured out a code to overlay our language and teach kids how to read.
Thank you. That was wonderful. That's a prime example of things that I know there are parents who are watching who don't quite understand what's going on in their child's mind and how it should be broken down so that they can begin to understand. And what you did is extremely helpful. You mentioned that sometimes dyslexia is confused for a vision issue, and it's not a vision issue. Is there a connectedness between the two?
There is. There are lots of myths about vision and dyslexia, mm-hmm. but if you've ever heard of tracking and convergence issues, being your eye muscles working, mm-hmm. sometimes happens from some other reason, but sometimes when dyslexic kids are victims of poor instruction, they are jumping around the page looking for words that are familiar, mm-hmm. and they develop tracking issues because they don't practice taking their eyes across the page, decoding the words. Mm-hmm. And so the connection is later on. These tracking issues don't cause dyslexia. Poor instruction often creates these issues.
Okay, I understand. What are the ways that dyslexia presents in a student?
A real young student, you might actually have a speech issue because they're not hearing the sounds and being able to replicate the sounds mm-hmm. when they're talking. But really you see it in school when they're learning to read and write and they're struggling. They may get a word and then not get it. Mm-hmm. Whereas other kids might, once they learn a word, it's learned.
Okay.
So they may not have had enough repetition. Rhyming is a big one because you really need that phonemic awareness. So if they don't like Dr. Seuss, if they're just not able to guess that rhyme at the end of the word, that's another big sign. Understood.org has a great list of symptoms at different ages, depending how much remediation you've gotten. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of comorbid things with dyslexia. Usually these things are accommodated rather than dyslexia is something that you need instruction to fix.
Let's talk about dyslexia in older students. If it's been identified previously, or if it hasn't been identified and we're starting to think that this may be an answer to long-held questions with the student's academic career. I am one of those students who learned later in life as a late teen, a college freshman, that was what was going on all the time. And I was in the vision area, et cetera, et cetera. So everything that you say is kind of my childhood. But there may be parents out there who are thinking, this sounds familiar, and I didn't know.
Yeah. Well, if you're pretty sure your kid is pretty bright, or even just averagely intelligent, but they're just not picking up on reading, that may be the issue. It could just be an issue of poor instruction. We have a lot of poor instruction in our schools. Teachers are not taught how to teach reading in teaching college. But so there's as the kids get older, there's three things. One, a remediated dyslexic kid like my son. He's got one trajectory. A diagnosed kid who never really got the remediation is another. And then there's all the kids that never got the diagnosis. So a kid that's been remediated probably still reads more slowly than their peers, especially if they were remediated late. It still doesn't come as naturally. They can get it, but it's just not as natural and quick. I read about 4 times faster than my husband and son. Yeah. Like if we're all reading directions or doing something, I'm done and waiting for them. But that's how it is. Yeah. But still, so my son still uses some accommodations in high school. He has an ICT class where, he can really talk to the teacher if he didn't get to finish the reading, and they can figure it out. He also has SETS. SETS is a special ed class. And a lot of dyslexic kids will use that as kind of study hall with a teacher. And so they actually have access to their teachers because maybe they just couldn't keep up with everything. There's a lot of reading in high school and in college. And so having more access to your teachers is always a good thing. He also still sometimes uses audiobooks. If he has a lot of reading, and maybe some of it's only on PDFs, and some of the PDF computer readers are okay, some of them are not, he'll choose to read something that is on an audiobook by audio, and then do the rest of the reading manually. So he still will use Learning Ally is another great link to put in there. Those are audiobooks read by volunteers, and so they have the intonation, usually. And they have Ally, it's learningally.org. Okay. And the subscription is pretty cheap. It's about $125 a year for all the books you want to read. Oftentimes, school districts now are subscribing to that and giving the subscriptions to their students. So it's a great resource. Sometimes we choose Audible as well. If you've ever heard Donald Sutherland read Ernest Hemingway, you'll think you're watching a movie. And so sometimes, depending who it is, Sissy Spacek read To Kill a Mockingbird. It was amazing. But usually Learning Ally, because of the subscription nature, it's our go-to thing. If you never got the remediation, but you have the diagnosis, you still have the law on your side. There's 2 laws. There's the Americans with Disability Act, and there's the Individuals IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And those both will help your dyslexic kids in school and for their life. So the IDEA is what provides for the IEPs that we discussed earlier, or what's called Section 50, the IEPs. The ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, provides for 504s. Those are accommodations. So an accommodation might be technology. It might be the school has to provide Learning Ally. It might be a speech to text because you've never learned how to spell. And there's other kind of technology. athelp.org is a great resource for technology for dyslexic kids. And so those 2 laws can help diagnose dyslexic kids on their school career. ADA will help you also with accommodations for testing. You might need time and a half or double time to take a test because there's so much reading. And so you can get accommodations for that. It'll even help you in the workplace. In the workplace, if you are hired to do something, maybe stock shelves, but then asked to write a memo, if you have disclosed that you are dyslexic, you are covered by the ADA, because, and you can't write because the ADA protects you with your disabilities. You can just say, I'm dyslexic. I wrote this memo as best I could. You can fix the typos. Here you go. You cannot get fired for that. If you have disclosed that you are dyslexic, the ADA will protect you. So, back in school, we have the ADA for 504s. We have IEPs for other support. IEPs can have instruction and support and accommodations. 504s only have accommodations.
Okay.
There are education advocates all over the country that can help families achieve these. And they're different organizations. They're usually run by your state education system. But if you're not diagnosed, this is a big issue. Okay. Even third and fourth graders develop anxiety and depression when they can't keep up with their peers. As you get older, this can get worse. I was on a panel once on mental health, and I was asked to talk about mental health and dyslexia. Before me on the panel was a woman who had dropped out of high school. She had gone from one codependent relationship to another. She had been abused. And finally, at age 40, she got her GED and got a community college degree in AA. And then I started talking about, kids with anxiety and depression and how this stayed with them their whole career if they were not diagnosed and helped. And if the underlying conditions like dyslexia were not actually diagnosed and remediated. Mm-hmm. She asked if she could interrupt me, this other woman, because it turns out that she struggled in school and that's why she dropped out. Her GED instructor suggested that she might be dyslexic. And that's when she got diagnosed when she was 40 years old. And she was taught how to read well enough to pass a GED and go and get her associate's degree. Turns out her GED instructor was at a panel I had given at an adult literacy conference. So it all went around in circles. But these are the kind of things, her story is not untypical of a lot of undiagnosed dyslexic kids. Mm-hmm. But there's also the story of Charles Schwab or David Boies or I think Whoopi Goldberg actually dropped out of high school. There are a lot of successful dyslexic kids or people that made it through. Mm-hmm. Whoopi Goldberg and Jennifer Aniston have their scripts recorded for them. And they listen to their scripts to memorize them. Shark Tank, they're all dyslexic and they've used different accommodations their whole lives. Mm-hmm. Most of them were diagnosed late, and let's see, David Boies, I think he had a girlfriend write all his law school papers.
Wow. So what I'm hearing are two things. If you're a parent of a teen and whether they've been diagnosed, remediated or not, first, make sure that you have access to all of the accommodations that you do and use them. And also make sure that you're receiving the correct instruction, reading instruction, etc., and that you may have to leave or supplement your current schooling.
Right.
Okay. So we can't get away from COVID because it refuses to leave. So have you noticed a difference? Is there a difference during COVID with your work, the activism that you're doing, but also the number of students who are either diagnosed or how formally remediated students are reacting to the change in learning?
I think it's really individual. My work has actually become easier over Zoom. I've been able to attend so many more sessions without traveling around town. Yeah. I've been giving presentations in Staten Island and Brooklyn and everywhere, so without leaving my desk. So that's been great. Mm-hmm. The instruction for kids, it all depends on the talent of the teachers. I think a lot more kids, because they got so much less instruction, are struggling even more. Okay. Especially those K-2 kids who are just learning to read it. Fewer, the reading rates are just falling. Mm-hmm. They have a little more time to catch up. In New York City, at least, we've had a lot of activism, and the city is responding. They've seen a successful pilot program and are building a K-2 good literacy program. And our new chancellor just said we have to grow it even more. We have to train more teachers in good literacy skills, and we have to really have fewer programs to teach in our schools. We have to choose programs that work. We can't have the invalid programs that, forget phonemic awareness and phonics and really just expect that kids learn that on their own. So there's some good things happening. There's a lot of legislation around the country that got passed. Colorado has excluded all bad instruction. They said you can't use that. Our Department of Ed will not fund it. You can't use it. Wow. And there's other laws going on, in different progress in different states, for screening for dyslexia when the kids are young, to starting schools for dyslexic kids, to training teachers. And there's some aimed at teaching colleges. But we are 50 different states when it comes to education. So there's not one thing I can say about our country and dyslexia.
Okay, we're coming towards the end of our time. And before we do, I want to make sure I ask you two things, but I also want to acknowledge that we have Stephanie says, thank you for having subtitles, because that helps. She's taking notes and she's using the subtitles. And Kathleen says that they love Audible because it's real people reading and easier for her son to listen. So that's a good tool. Any Audible type, and what you told us about Learning Ally, right, is where they can receive subscriptions to.
Yep. There's some other free sources. Libraries have some others, and a national one called Bookshare, and those are computer generated voices. Mm-hmm. Some people like those better. A lot of people really need that intonation.
Okay. So if I'm a parent, speak to me, I'm a parent of a teen, we're being hypothetical here, and I've noticed some of the things that you've mentioned, and a light bulb goes off, and I think, okay, this is something I need to address. It's all new for me. Where do I start?
Wow.
In 3 seconds.
If you have a lot of resources, get a private neuropsych.
Okay.
Think of this as a person that you have an ongoing relationship with. Mm-hmm. If you are not someone who has a lot of research, a lot of resources, there may be some help in your city. But usually these are for people below poverty level. And then there's all these people in the middle that's really hard.
Yeah.
So for those people, some of the universities are training their psychology students to do evaluations, and that's one way to get it. Sometimes hospitals, especially children's hospitals, will do them. And those are often very transactional relationships, but they give you some good information and some things. And a transactional relationship may not be bad if your kid is older, because they're moving on. When my kid was really young, I went for the ongoing relationship because we knew we were going to have to repeat it every 3 years for the schools and call on this person every once in a while when something else happened. So these are all decisions you have to make. But the people in the middle between resourceful and poor really have a hard time with this. And there's a lot of time to wait. There is an organization that I'm now consulting for called Jayne, JAYNEB.com. And they are working with psychologists around the country to provide neuropsychs at a very low cost.
Wonderful.
They will consult with your school system, or they'll work directly with parents. They have right now, so far, they have psychologists licensed in about 4 states, and they're working on getting to all 50 states.
See, your eyes got big when I asked that, but you answered it. You did that. We have a question here. I want to make sure we get this question before we break. Can you recommend any colleges for dyslexic high school students to look at? Wonderful question. Thank you, Debbie.
Okay, if you're still struggling to read or reading more slowly, University of Arizona has it's called the SALT Center, and they support freshmen with learning disabilities, both with academic support and self-advocacy support. Landmark College is also known, and Davison College is also known for this. But more and more colleges are looking at supporting students with learning disabilities. It's a kind of hopeful thing in our future that these colleges are looking at it. But one thing is really to work with your student on self-advocacy. They should be able to talk to their professor, be able to ask for notes written, get them if they can't write fast enough, ask if they can record the session. They have to be their own self-advocate, and that's probably the most important skill.
Wonderful. Thank you. We are at the end of our time, and I want to end by thanking you for joining us. This is really good information, and we're going to provide some of these. I put the links in the comment section, and we'll try to provide some of the other information that you shared. I always like to end with asking our guests to give us one takeaway. If you can give us one takeaway from this discussion, what would it be? Or what is it?
I think that older kids are often left out of this discussion. There's a lot of stuff happening K-2. So I'm just thrilled that you asked me to talk about the older kids and these 3 different groups of older kids and how we can address them.
Mm-hmm. So don't stop if you have an older kid. If you begin where you're at, begin where your student is. And if you're in the middle, it's going to take a little more effort, but there are resources out there for you.
Yep.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We will see you next time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.